Story 1. I'm shocked that no one has mentioned Discworld or any Terry Pratchett books. Everything in the Discworld series has taught me so much about being a decent human, how to treat others, and to do the job in front of you. I especially love the Tiffany Aching books because they focus on finding strength within yourself and embracing who you are while being a great human. Story 2. The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. I value being able to feed my family and have a safe, clean home and environment at work. If you ever feel burnt out or frustrated by your job, read this book. It used to be very challenging. Story 3. The Count of Monte Cristo taught me about obsession and the cost of revenge, about the pursuit of happiness and the dangers it can bring. It explores the duality of man. Good men can be bad, and bad men can be good. Right and wrong can be situational. Additionally, it is a great story of loss and redemption. Story 4. The Bible. After growing up in a fundamentalist environment, I read the text several times and realized that what I was reading did not align with what the church was teaching. Story 5. The Book of Joy. Nelson Mandela and the Dalai Lama discuss finding joy and meaning through adversity. Story 6. Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I still cry every time I read it. Story 7. Stephen King's Pet Sematary was the book that really got me into reading when I was 9. It showed me the dangers of letting grief consume you and emphasized that letting go of those we have lost is an important step toward healing. The best way to honor them is to continue to live and remember them. Story 8. When I first read Phenomenology of Perception by Maurice Merleau-Ponty, it completely changed the way I understood reality. Before that, I thought of consciousness as a detached observer, like a camera recording the world. However, Merleau-Ponty showed me that perception is not passive. It is embodied, situated, and intentional. I am not in front of the world. I am in the world through my body. This realization transformed everything. It made me understand that truth is not something we extract like data. It is something we experience. This shifted how I think about design, ethics, and capitalism because all of it begins with the body as the first site of meaning. Story 9. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning profoundly impacted me during my struggle with deep depression. The insights in the book provided significant support during that challenging time. Story 10. Alan Watts, in his book on the taboo against knowing the self, explores how society undermines our understanding and perception of the self and life in general. Story 11. It's out of print, so it's hard to find a copy. However, I still cite this book quite often. It's not something the Central Intelligence Agency wants you to read, that's for sure. Story 12. The Bible changed my life after I read it cover to cover. It convinced me that what I had been taught throughout my upbringing in the church was not true. Story 13. Don't Make Fun of Me. Looking for Alaska. I read it when I was 13 and then read it again several times over the years. Story 14. Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I do not have obsessive-compulsive disorder, but I related significantly to the main character's mental health struggles. Prompted me to seek professional help. Story 15. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. I was working at Snow College in Ephraim, Utah in 1978 as a handyman, a young woman and the only one on a 20-man crew for the summer. I came across the book in a climate-controlled room when we were refinishing the wood-paneled walls. I didn't have time to really read it because I was working, but I was so impressed that I came back and copied down a page. It was the parable about how parents don't own their children, that the parent is the bow and their children are the arrows sent out into the world. My first baby was a full-term stillborn, and the type of parent I wanted to be was heavy on my mind. I was only 19 at the time. I didn't find out the book had been in continuous publication until 20 years later when I came across it in a thrift store. I hadn't even written the name of the book down at the time because I was sneak reading it and didn't think to do that. Since then, I've bought and given it away a dozen times and written verses of it, framed as gifts. There is so much simple wisdom in that one small book. Story 16. A couple of years ago, a friend I was getting to know gifted me a copy of Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The author is a professor of botany and a Native American. The book compares and contrasts two different perspectives of plants and the natural world. I really enjoyed reading it and felt it helped me get to know my new friend. I also lent it to my mom, and she enjoyed reading it and discussing it with me. That was back in 2022. Just 2 days ago, my girlfriend and I were at a mutual friend's house, and I noticed a copy of Braiding Sweetgrass on the coffee table. We had a good conversation about it. A week ago, my girlfriend and I took a hike, and she appreciated my enthusiasm for trees, snakes, and birds. Just how much I love the sense of discovery that comes with every hike. Seeing this book on our friend's coffee table made me realize that it deserves partial credit for how I see the natural world. I plan to pick up another copy of the book to give to my girlfriend soon and start a reread so we can discuss it together. In short, the book has developed my appreciation for the natural world and brought me closer to important people in my life. Story 17, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. My conservative father nearly had a fit when my 12th grade teacher assigned us that book, and he was right. It did turn me into a peace-seeking Buddhist. Story 18, Beatrix Potter's Stories, Where the Wild Things Are, The Gruffalo, My Naughty Little Sister, the Narnia series, How to Train Your Dragon, Warrior Cats, His Dark Materials, and the Alex Rider series have all made me happier and helped me enjoy life more after reading them. Story 19, Extreme Ownership, Jocko Willink. People need to learn how to be introspective and take responsibility for themselves. It makes life much easier when you know how. When you make a mistake at work, you own it, correct it, and move on. You will already have the solution, and you build trust with everyone around you more easily. Story 20. The Bible is an epic narrative that changed my perspective, leading me to identify as an atheist because I find it nonsensical. I no longer view religion in the same light. One must be easily deceived to believe it is anything other than a work of fiction. Story 21. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Deep Conceptualization and Symbolism. Specifically, every part, big or small, has a function when assembled correctly. Story 22. Illusions. Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah is an amazing book with a great message. Story 23. I have a few answers to this, but the first one that comes to mind is the book I'm currently reading, Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. It explores the relationships between fungi and other forms of life, examining the boundaries we draw in the natural world. The book offers compelling examples of beneficial symbiosis that can inspire how we view and interact with nature and each other. Story 24, Run Baby Run. I was a bit of a troublemaker in my youth. Aside from the strong religious theme, it opened my eyes and convinced me I needed to change my ways. Gang life is not for me. Story 25, Autobiography of a Recovering Skinhead. Powerful book. The author, Frank Mank, holds nothing back when addressing his numerous mistakes and acts of cruelty. It demonstrates that people can change, even if many do not. Story 26, Carl Sagan's The Demon-Haunted World, was gifted to me at a time when I was deconstructing my beliefs in Christianity. It articulates many of my growing concerns about rational thinking and how easily people are convinced to believe things without good reason. Story 27, Psychopath Free by Jackson Mackenzie. I was in an emotionally abusive relationship with a narcissist for 4 years. This book has saved me and helped me sort out my feelings when no one else could. When my anger subsided and I was ready to return to a normal life, I read their other book titled Whole Again. I owe my life to these books. Story 28, Incarnations of Immortality is an 8-book fantasy series by Piers Anthony. The books focus on one of 8 supernatural offices: death, time, fate, war, nature, evil, good, and night. The series is set in a fictional reality and history parallel to ours, where society has advanced both magic and modern technology. Story 29, Letters from Rivka and the Uglies series. One is based on a true story. The other is fantasy that is ironically real. Story 30. A basic answer is that you cannot repeat or rewrite your past, and attempting to do so might end up harming you. Story 31. I Believe Moms of Human Bondage has contributed to my overall pessimistic and nihilistic outlook on life, having read it when I was 14. Story 32. Nick Hart was here. I first read it a few months before my grandfather died when I was 12. It completely changed my understanding of human grief and mourning. One of my good friends had been killed a year earlier, and I remember feeling strange because I wasn't grieving like everyone else seemed to. Reading that book helped me understand how grief is processed by different people. Even now, when a loved one dies, I still reread it and recommend it to others. Story 33. Back in 1994, I set up a Rage Against the Machine website that showed the lyrics and explained their meaning. They had a recommended reading list, and I would go to our local library to check the books out. Quite a few of those books had a profound impact on me, being around 13 years old at the time. Perhaps it was William Bloom's Killing Hope, U.S. military and CIA interventions since World War II, that opened my eyes to the larger schemes at play and the greater powers involved. Story 34. The original Mistborn trilogy resonated with me deeply through Vin and her anxiety. One line, though not a major one or from a significant plot point, truly struck me. Don't worry about giving people what they want. Give them who you are and let that be enough. Story 35. Calvin and Hobbes encourage you to appreciate the time you spend with loved ones and to value your imagination. Soon you will become a dried-up adult. Story 36. The Count of Monte Cristo is an allegory for my life. I am still fighting to regain control of my life, and it is truly inspiring. Story 37. The Bible. When I finished reading it, I felt deeply depressed and lost a lot of respect for my fellow man. I had vastly overestimated human intelligence. It was frightening to realize that 3 in 10 people on the planet believe the deity described in that book is real. It is clearly a work of fiction, and it is embarrassing for an adult to claim belief in it. The deity is described as having traits that are defects in human character: jealousy, vengefulness, narcissism, punishing many for the mistakes of a few, and murder on a massive scale. It is by no means a perfect being. The contradictions are numerous, and the stories are clearly fabricated. Story 38. The Midnight Library helped when I felt nothing but regret for my choices in life and was in a much worse headspace. Story 39. Every kid I know gets a copy of this for their high school graduation. Alan Watts' The Book on the Taboo of Knowing Yourself. Story 40. Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin. I read it on a plane once, and I was convinced by the concept of the conquest of bread. It made perfect sense. Story 41. The Awakening by Kate Chopin is not inherently life-changing, but it was exactly what I needed when I read it. It completely changed how I viewed my life for the better. Story 42. Hospicing Modernity by Vanessa Machado de Oliveira, recommended by my therapist, has really helped me with some of the hopelessness I feel about everything happening. Story 43. Are You Running With Me, Jesus? By Malcolm Boyd took my immature understanding of God and faith and shattered it into tiny pieces. Then it showed me a different way to reassemble everything. Story 44. The Pearl by John Steinbeck is a very simple book, but carries a message that resonates with the heart of every human, especially those in struggle. Story 45. The Pig Who Sang to the Moon, The Emotional Intelligence of Farm Animals. It is really hard to eat meat after reading that book. Story 46. Science Made Stupid by Tom Weller is a book I still quote today, 30 years after reading it. Story 47. A Course in Miracles by Marianne Williamson. I have a well-worn, annotated, highlighted copy by my bed, and sometimes I take it with me when I travel. Love, not fear. Surrender. Ask for a miracle. Story 48. I read it last year, so the jury is still out, but if I had to choose, I would say The Dawn of Humanity. It challenged the notion that inequality is the unavoidable result of civilization and suggested that we view prehistoric and ancient humans as playful beings who experimented with their lives and the organization of their communities. Story 49. The Authoritarians by Dr. Altemeyer is a book focused on how authoritarian tendencies influence various viewpoints and actions, including religion, fear, and zero-sum thinking. It explains that these individuals often harbor a deep-seated fear of authority figures, which can lead to harmful societal outcomes. Additionally, The Battle for God by Karen Armstrong examines the development of Middle Eastern religions, which constitute a significant portion of the world's faiths today, during the early and Middle Ages of the Common Era. Story 50. Prozac Nation. As someone who was suffering from depression at the time but unsure what it was or how to describe it or handle it, the book was a lifesaver for me. Story 51. The Uncontrollability of the World by Hartmut Rosa. I study philosophy and wrote my bachelor's thesis on that book. Completely changed the way I see the world. Story 52. Not a popular answer, but the Gospels. I always struggled with what to do or how to act, but Jesus has provided me with a great example to follow in being a good person. His actions are inspiring to me, and using them as a guide has changed the way I live my life for the better. Story 53. Un Vie, by Guy de Maupassant, is a French novel. Although he is not my favorite author, that book resonated with me due to its themes. It is a rather sad story for most of its length, about people willingly relinquishing control of their lives while watching it unfold. One day, you wake up old and wonder what happened and where all those years went. Interestingly, it calmed my anxiety about the future. Story 54. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. Change Your Paradigm by Bob Proctor. Story 55. The Republic by Plato is an interesting book. It helped me change my thinking and recognize my errors in my thought processes. Story 56. Influence by Robert Cialdini. This was the first book in the genre I read that sparked my interest in social psychology and behavioral economics. Story 57. The Sea Wolf. I can't remember the story or the character names, but I recall the captain's speech about life being a yeasty, unthinking thing. It had a profound impact on me. I was in 3rd or 4th grade at the time, and it was my first real experience of perceiving life without religion influencing my perspective. Still lingers in my mind. Story 58. How to Win Friends and Influence People. My dad had Carnegie's book and made me read it in middle school. It impressed one of my teachers who saw it in my bag and taught me a lot about psychology in workplace conversations. Story 59. Kitchen Confidential. I read it shortly after Anthony Bourdain passed away, and it changed my entire view on humanity. Story 60. Humankind by Rutger Bregman is a great read for anyone who has lost faith in humanity and sees the future as bleak. Story 61. Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten by Robert Fulghum was first recommended to me by my mother when I was a little girl in the early 1990s. Since then, I have reread it at least once every other year. It is also available as an audiobook. Story 62. I have 2 books, Dialectic of Enlightenment by Max Horkheimer and Theodore Adorno, and Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher. Story 63. Tuck Everlasting. I was forced to read it in 6th grade, but it captivated me, and I will never forget that she chose a full life with an end. It gave me a lot of perspective at a very young age. Story 64. The Bible. I am not religious. However, the people who truly appreciate the book continue to take actions that affect my friends, family, and community. Story 65. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, was assigned reading for my first philosophy class. I read the entire book in one day. Story 66. How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie is the first self-help book, and it truly is beneficial. Story 67. The New Thing. Wait until you reach the part about the cat, and then consider all the chapters you read before. Story 68. It's Not You by Dr. Ramani Durvasula offered insights that clarified decades of confusing and hurtful experiences. Story 69. Animal Farm. I remember picking it up in the 7th grade because I was interested in magic and talking animals. The reading teacher knew this and suggested that I might not enjoy it since it wasn't really about what I thought it was about. I took it as a challenge. At first, I understood that it wasn't just about talking animals. Then I realized it was a commentary on society, and I recognized it commented on human foolishness, illustrating how we are doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over again, constantly picking up the pieces and convincing ourselves that we will do better next time. More people need to read Animal Farm. Story 70. Delta V and its sequel Critical Mass by Daniel Suarez give me hope for the against all odds scenario where the human race succeeds in expanding into space. Story 71, On the Beach by Neville Shute. As a high school junior in 1978, it made nuclear conflict that much scarier. Story 72, To Kill a Mockingbird completely changed my worldview. I was raised by individuals with racist beliefs, and that book elegantly illustrates why racism is unjust. Story 73. Every historical and contemporary novel I have read makes me wonder where those heroes are. Just kidding. The psychology textbook in college had me trying to diagnose everyone I knew for years. Story 74. The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein is a life-changing book. Everyone I told this to agreed with me after reading it. You will never look at a dog the same way. Enzo changed my life. Story 75. Stick with me on why he's just not that into you. This simple book taught me about reciprocity in relationships, especially when they are new. Not just dating relationships, but any kind. If someone wants to be in your life, they will be. It won't feel one-sided. If it does, that person isn't into you, and you can move on and invest your energy and time into someone who is. Story 76. The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis profoundly changed how I experience this world and this life in the best way possible. Story 77. Catch-22 and Fugitive Pieces. I was in the army when my dad gave me Catch-22. It wasn't long before I quit, and Fugitive Pieces opened my eyes to good writing. Story 78. The Demon-Haunted World by Carl Sagan influenced me as a teenager. Now at 42, I still feel like I tap into that skepticism all the time. Story 79. Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler is the first book that made me consider exploring religion. Although the book discusses a combination of different faiths, it highlights how spirituality can provide support in even the most challenging circumstances. Story 80. Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. Book by Caroline Criado Perez. You would not believe the extent to which women are excluded by design. The real reason for this exclusion is that we perceive the rights of 50% of the population as a minority interest. Story 81. The Bible. I grew up going to church with my mom. As a teenager, I became aware that even among different Christian churches, there are varying interpretations of the Bible. It was striking that people who worship the same figure cannot agree on their sacred texts. Additionally, realizing that a political party was aligned with these organizations provided me with strong reasons to unaffiliate from both. Story 82. The Death of Expertise by Tom Nichols. I gave it to my little brother as he entered into a marriage of extreme conservatives. Story 83. Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. It parodies not only the Catholic Church but also everything from Greek philosophers to Nietzsche and everything in between. It made me want to learn more about theology and philosophy while being extremely funny. Story 84. The Rape of the American Puritan Ethic by Alan Sherman humorously chronicles the changes in sexual dynamics and politics in America from 1945 to the 1970s. It includes a chapter on police violence. Although it hasn't aged well in some respects, it revealed to me that the America I learned about in school was not the complete truth. I read it when I was 14 and got in trouble for bringing it to school. Story 85. Valis by Philip K. Dick is either the best or the most insane piece of reading I have ever done. However, if you are interested in questioning reality or theology, it is quite intriguing. Story 86. There are several influential works, but the Lord of the Rings series of books has probably had the most impact on me. Much of its messaging is reflective of real life, highlighting the sense of brotherhood and human bonds. It addresses racial divides, loss, grieving, and greed in otherwise good-natured individuals. The series explores the darkness that exists within all living beings while encouraging the redemption of those who seek it. It discusses the pain that lingers after trauma and how it becomes a part of us. Ultimately, it serves as a reminder that no matter how lost the world may feel, there is always hope and something worth fighting for. Story 87. How to Win Friends and Influence People. It may seem like manipulation, but it is actually about being nice, kind, and caring. Story 88. The spirit moves you and you fall down for its approach to understanding significant cultural differences in critical situations. Story 89. Living the Wisdom of the Tao by Wayne Dyer. The Power of Intention by Wayne Dyer. The Holy Quran by Allah. The Syriac Injil, Gospels. Unknown. Story 90. The Courage to be Disliked is a philosophy book about Adlerian psychology. It helped me find my place in the world during a difficult time when I was bedridden for months and felt I had no value. The book also changed how I viewed my thoughts. Story 91. Every advancement in technology leaves the intellectual development of the masses a step behind, leading to a decline in political maturity. It often takes many years or even generations for a society's understanding to adapt to new circumstances, until it regains the capacity for self-government that it previously possessed at a lower stage of civilization. Arthur Koestler, Darkness at Noon. Story 92. Theodore Roosevelt said, "I am a part of everything that I have read." If you are looking for self-help, consider The Body Keeps the Score. Other recommended titles include Ask the Dust by John Fante, 1984 by George Orwell, As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, and When the Air Hits Your Brain by Frank Verdosick Jr. There is an infinity of books to explore. Story 93. Demon-Haunted World by Carl Sagan sparked a lifelong interest in science and astronomy, fundamentally changing my self-reflection and application of critical thinking. It created anxiety about the future, but also offered a glimmer of hope. The work is remarkably prophetic, anticipating many of the challenges the 21st century has faced. Story 94. The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. A few others from the top of my list have also been mentioned. The Four Agreements, The Gift of Fear, Animal Farm, and 1984. Story 95. If Cats Disappeared from the World by Genki Koomura. In my experience, after finishing this book, it made me think about what really matters in life, what makes life valuable, and why our happiness has turned into likes, follows, and views. Why are we so impatient nowadays? To be honest, I felt a connection to the facts mentioned in the book. It made me realize that we have become so accustomed to romanticizing materialistic things that we have lost touch with what matters most. I highly recommend reading this book to anyone who likes to challenge their thoughts. Story 96. Dave Ramsey's The Total Money Makeover was a turning point for me. I was swimming in debt, trying to have flashy possessions like a fancy car and an expensive watch. Whether you agree with Dave Ramsey or not, the book is an eye-opener about not conforming to societal expectations. Since reading it, I evaluate every purchase I make. As a result, I have not only mostly gotten out of debt and built savings, but I have also embraced minimalism and learned what truly matters in life. Story 97. Actually, the Bible is only accessible for me through Father Mike Schmitz's Bible in a Year podcast format, where I listen and read along as he goes through the Bible in chronological order. It has been life-changing as I evolve. Story 98. The Necronomicon, also referred to as the Book of the Dead or under the purported original Arabic title of Kitab al-Azif, is a fictional grimoire appearing in stories by the horror writer H.P. Lovecraft and his followers. It was first mentioned in Lovecraft's 1924 short story, The Hound, written in 1922, though its purported author, the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazard, had been quoted a year earlier in Lovecraft's The Nameless City. Among other things, the work contains an account of the Old Ones, their history, and the means for summoning them, as well as summoning monsters and archaic deities. Story 99. The Setting Sun by Osamu Dazai. His work is amazing. This book made me look at the world very differently. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.